Right, what's up, everyone? So today we're going to be covering the three trades we ended up taking: one loss, um, two break evens, and one big win. So essentially, um, the break even here was an eval play that we ended up getting stopped out break even because of this stupid manipulation wick. And then obviously you can see we missed the whole upside expansion. I'm sure a lot of people would have got stopped here on the manipulation, taking out this LRO. But we ended up catching this huge downside move, which was essentially our main kind of bet for today. What we'd been talking about in the Telegram, we'll show proof after this. And we got stopped out break even here, trying to catch it early, which essentially would have held if we didn't move stops to break even. And yeah, we ended up taking one loss here as well, betting on it early during London because of like the setup was pretty good, but then obviously market wanted to take out previous day high first. So yeah, let's break down the trades and get into it. Right, so essentially the preface behind the first trade was us trying to catch the whole rebalance leg early. So as we can see here, yesterday we mentioned in the Telegram that price was basically extremely premiumed throughout New York session yesterday. Price just went extremely like directionally long to the upside and traded into the daily gap. And more or less, we assume that's because we had CPI today. Data was expected to say the same for the yearly, so inflation rate was expected to say the same year over year, which of course gives the Fed more room to cut rates and continue quantitative easing. So that's why we assumed that yesterday price was just violently ramping to the upside. But anyway, price traded into the daily gap, failed to mitigate it, and then towards the end of the session and through CME Open just before Asia, we ended up getting the hourly inversion, which would have been this gap here. This is essentially just the trade. Yes, we ended up slamming through this hourly gap here, which was the first major high time frame inversion that we ended up seeing the whole day. If we go down to the 15-minute, we can see that through Asia and London, basically, price was more or less just chopping, right? But what we really wanted to see was a rebalancing of this leg, which was essentially the whole preface behind the trade today. Price ramped extremely violently yesterday, ended up sweeping the previous week high, which was, sorry, previous day and previous week high. So this was Thursday, this was Friday, that was previous week, that was previous day, then that was Monday's high, and left behind basically all these lows, even all the way down to here. There's all this essentially trendline LRO. But anyway, what we wanted to do essentially was bet on the rebalance. So price came through, ended up inverting the hourly, failed to trade into the hourly during Asia, came down, and then during London, we ended up souping Asia's high in the hourly gap with a bearish SMT, completely failed to reinvert the hourly gap. 15-minute bearish inversion. We had a 5-minute bearish inversion, and we had a bearish retest of the gap. So essentially, this is what we called in the Telegram that we were betting on the rebalance here. We ended up entering not with too much size, but with kind of a tight stop. So as you can see, stop was about here, above the bearish retest, and we were betting on the rebalance early. But again, we got stopped out, obviously, because during pre-market, price ended up ramping up and taking out previous day high and leaving obviously the data high, which was when the CPI rate was released. Right, so just going over it again, the reason for the first trade was we got delivery from a high time frame PDRA, which was the daily. We got the hourly inversion. We got a bearish retest of it and failure to displace above it with a total soup and an SMT inside the inversion. We then had a 5-minute and a 15-minute bearish inversion to the downside and a 5-minute bearish retest. Clear draws below. But however, what went wrong was we actually entered this trade before the data manipulation leg, and we ended up getting stopped out, and there was a clear draw on liquidity above, which price obviously wanted to soup. So then we ended up getting our winning trade, which was essentially, so market opened, and normally when market opens, we like to kind of see a Judas swing, kind of baiting in directional positions, and then obviously going towards the true desired direction. As we've outlined before and had outlined in the Telegram, we wanted to see price rebalance lower. We were expecting an element of the CPI rate or the inflation rate being priced in because of yesterday's strong price action. And especially after seeing this move during pre-market, which ended up stopping us out, we obviously wanted to see price distribute lower. So what did we get? We ended up getting a soup of previous day high here on the top of the data wick. We ended up making the data high. Then we ended up getting a 1 minute inverse for value gap. We did enter a little bit earlier because of the strong displacement that came, and obviously the trade was playing out. But going into market open, obviously we then had stops to break even. But going into market open, we then Judas swung higher, which ended up getting us stopped out at break even. But however, obviously what we then wanted to see was, right, cool, we're going to see a sweep of data high, essentially a silver bullet model where we take out one previous external draw. So strong displacement in the other direction, which would have been an inverse fair value gap, and then take out the other side, which would have been the data wick, and then obviously continue to distribute lower, ideally to other external draws such as London low, Asia low, and draws from the previous weeks. But however, what we saw on the 1 minute was that we ended up Judas swinging higher at New York market open, which was this leg. We ended up taking out previous day high again, but the thing was, price ended up slamming through this 1 minute inversion here, front running the data wick, the top of the data wick. So for us, that was almost like, well, you know what, even if we do take out the data high, like we do end up coming and reversing, really and truly it will just give us a better re-entry. And really and truly, because of how strong the downside momentum was, we were like, well, if we do take out the data high, price isn't going to distribute too much higher above it. However, we ended up getting the 1 minute inverse fair value gap, but we ended up entering as price just as we saw price kind of strongly displace this candle and basically slam through it. And then obviously we had our clear draws. As mentioned before, we had London low, Asia low. Our original TP was going to be Asia low, but in and around this area, we basically ended up starting to see price stall a bit. So just as price dropped through London low, we ended up closing out, and we ended up getting a nice 143 pip move, or a nice 1 to 5.64 risk to reward. So again, we're really happy with that. Again, it was a really slow grind down. We were really confused as to why, considering we just had the yearly CPI rate. And but yeah, regardless, anyway, really nice trade. Ended up mitigating a ton of lows there, and a ton of LRL from buy side demand. And yeah, so that was essentially the winning trade for us. Right, so again, this is just the reason for the second trade. We had clear draws on liquidity below, as we mentioned before, as price was trading extremely premiumed. We had pre-market manipulation and on the data release, and a slow Judas at open meant that it was clear price wanted to rebalance lower. We had strong displacement down through the 1 minute IFVG, showing the market's true intention after the failure to soup the data high. And then the last trade was one we ended up taking on evals, so a different account to this, hence why the arrows are on here. But really and truly, the setup was more or less our textbook setup. If you've seen our trading strategy video, then you will know that obviously this ticks most boxes. But essentially, after the slow grind down here, we ended up leaving behind all of this low resistance liquidity here, and the data high. But one level that price interacted significantly was previous day high. So for us, more or less, that was going to be TP, as obviously this trade was betting on a huge expansion to the upside, and obviously we were pretty right to the tick. But essentially, so the whole preface with the of the trade was we had a 5 minute gap here, which also overlapped with a 15 minute as well, obviously just a few pips off. But essentially, so what we ended up doing was price ended up displacing down into a PD array. We had so in the PD array, we had a total soup of this low, failure to displace below it. We had a bullish SMT and a strong inverse fair value gap straight out of that. Again, on top of that, we had this 3 minute inverse as well, which as you can see was just stupidly strong to the upside. So again, this ticked a lot of boxes for us. We had low resistance liquidity as draw and a final draw at the top. This was 176 pip trade, 1 to 4.3 risk to reward. Absolutely beautiful, with stops below the local wick of the SMT. But where we went wrong was we ended up putting our stop here above the 3 minute inversion. And then obviously you can see only by a couple of pips, we ended up getting stopped out on what was this absolute manipulation candle to the downside, taking out all of this LRL before price expanded to the upside. So really annoyed about that. I know a lot of people ended up getting stopped out on this candle. Really annoying. But again, that was an eval play, but it is nice to see setups play out like that, especially when it ticked all of our boxes. Right, so again, the reason for this eval trade was that we souped a low inside a PD array. We made a bullish SMT after the soup, and we had such a strong 1 minute and 3 minute IFVG to the upside. There was clear LRL before from the sell side move down into the PD array. with a final high time frame draw above his final TP. It was absolutely textbook, but we ended up getting stopped out, basically a break even on the huge manipulation wick because we had our stops above the 3-minute inversion and not where we initially entered. Right, so that's the end of the episode. Again, we hope you enjoyed, and if you do want to join the free Telegram, just drop a comment and we'll send you the link. And yeah, hope to see you in the next video.
See you in the next episode. Magnus, out.